thanks for our partners actually for this supporting this event. This is the phase 2 of the session. We had to sort of change this format because after President agreed to our suggestion. So what we'll do is I have some questions to the panel, and we'll get some initial responses, and then maybe Treasury Secretary is also around. We can ask for some of to respond some of the issues about accountability or enforcement or implementation. I'd like to turn to Mr. Wijewardena. Given the IMF expectations, given the aspirations of the political party that backs the president, in your view, do you think the president has done a decent job in balancing the budget?
Yeah, Nista, now, in fact, we all know that Sri Lanka is going through a very difficult time now. In fact, in 2022, we all thought that we might, descend to the level of Lebanon. But we didn't do that, and the central bank has done a wonderful job of stabilizing the economy and bringing the IMF to the picture so that we are able to now build the confidence among the foreign investors and foreign creditors on Sri Lanka. And the present budget is a budget which is targeting an election. Even though President here said that he denied it, it's targeting election. Therefore, he will have to walk on a tightrope. I mean, the MBA Association has very aptly chosen the title for the present thing, because it's a tight walk. It's a balancing activity. But in the balancing activity, I have seen that most of the budgetary numbers which Mr. Mahitha Sirivardena has produced, they conform to the IMF requirements, because that revenue 13% of GDP, and the expenditure is, and the primary account surplus is also going to be in line with what the IMF has said. So on paper, Nista, I don't have any problem, and it's a very good balancing activity.
Thank you. Chiu, I just want to ask you in terms of reforms effort, where do you see progress and where do you see going forward of improvements?
Thank you. First of all, we really recognize the remarkable achievements and progress made in the reforms. Last year, the crisis was at unprecedented level, as you all know. That really changed the landscape, the whole development landscape for Sri Lanka. So since then, the really government took very swift, decisive actions in introducing many measures that were necessary to stabilize the economy and also to the fiscal as well as the debt basically management, so that the country can come out of such a crisis situation. And then we must recognize the remarkable resilience the Sri Lanka, as well as the Sri Lankan people, has demonstrated over the past year. And then we are here now into almost like a year and a half, 15 months since the crisis erupted last year. And that we started seeing the first sign of stabilization. Of course, as the title says, it's still a tightrope walk, so we're not totally out of it. But the progress made in terms of inflation coming down much faster than expected, and also the pressure on the forex was also much eased, and so definitely the stabilization effort has to continue, and then that budget shows the commitment and determination, although the targets are quite challenging, but it shows the government is trying to continue the path. So going forward, I think we need to increasingly move toward more growth-enhancing reforms. Government has already started some of the reform, the structural reforms, also to enhance the more medium-term growth, be it, all these reforms that government is doing, like energy sector reform, or the investment, the law, and then the trade facilitation. Those are all necessary and then important steps. Also, the World Bank has been working with the government through the budget support, development policy operations, and many other technical assistance to help create the enabling policy environment for better business environment, investment climate, and then so that the Sri Lanka can realize the more outward-oriented and also trade promotion going forward. Because the growth has to come from the private sector. So the job creation and all this, the investment and private capital has to be brought in. Government can do its part, but it has to give a room and space for the private sector to grow and invest. And we are supporting on the policy side, as well as the reforms like state-owned enterprise reform, especially the commercially oriented one, so that the more private participation can be encouraged. So the digital transformation, energy transformation is all important. And all these areas that the government president mentioned, be it the tourism or the logistics hub, those are based on the Sri Lanka's natural endowments, assets, and the strategic strength it has, so it has a lot of potential. So I think the country needs to build on that. And one more thing I want to mention, to add to that, is the women. The women's labor participation can be much, much higher, and Sri Lanka has a really wealth of educated, competent female that could be contributing more to the economy. So.
Thank you very much. I move on to Mr. Sirivardhana. Sorry for keeping you for so long, but I thought you have heard most of the comments. One is about transparency and also accountability coming from, President did explain that budgets can change, but what's the treasury, how the finance minister is ensuring that some of the progressive proposals are sort of implemented fast, and also making such progress available for easy access to the public to see how we are progressing in terms of allocation and achieving some of the milestones. I think IMF program has given a good head start. Maybe we need to also I think there are some agencies who are tracking the budget, but from a finance ministry perspective, what new efforts are being planned to ensure effective implementation and transparency?
Thank you, Nistar. Good morning to all of you. In fact, it's very good to see the questions that you raised. Those are very important. And on the matter of transparency, I also see that it's a good development that people are increasingly watching about the implementation of the budget, not only just the budget, the operations of the government itself. I think that's a very, very positive development. And the question that you ask is that, how we sort of, give or disseminate more information about the progress and implementation of the budget. Already, in fact, we are doing in the existing sort of, legal mechanism. For example, if you take the Fiscal Management Responsibility Act, legally we are supposed to publish two documents. That is, one is mid-year fiscal report, and the other one along with the budget. In fact, where this year also we have published it, fiscal management report. That fiscal management report that contains about the developments that taken place in the period that is considered in the year, but at the same time it provides some direction on the fiscal policy as well. That is by law. And in addition to that, this time around, in fact, we also thought about it, because people are asking more information. I don't know whether you got any chance to look at it, we sort of published these sort of, booklets to provide some sort of, a snapshot about the government budget and also the allocations, because most of the time what I have seen is that when people look at the budget, they think that budget speech is the budget. Budget speech is not the budget, because it contains about the future direction and also the progress that you have made, and also whatever the new proposals that would be basically adding to the already set out resources in the budget in terms of draft estimates. That is very important to understand. So this, in fact, particular publication meant to give some information about that. There we have indicated almost all the information about this year's budget, but this is before the proposals. I should say that as well. For example, if I read the allocations that we have already made, we have given, you can go to the website and you can download this and go through that. In fact, I invite you to go to that, because healthy economy, society, about 529 billion, knowledge-based economy, 532 billion, including education, social protection, about 714 billion. These are hard numbers that are there in the budget. And also strengthen economic services, 94 billion, and also commitment to a peaceful, fair and society, 243, and also somebody asked about the digitalization of public service, it's about 18 billion. So this time we thought of giving this sort of a broader information about the budget estimates, and then one can look at the new proposals and basically come to a sort of conclusion about the overall direction of the expenditure and also the priority areas of the government budget. That is very important. But I see your point. Although we have done these things, we should have some sort of a mechanism to give more and more information to give to the public about the progress that we are making. In fact, internally also we have felt that, we have had discussion on that. We would basically come up with some sort of a communication strategy to provide more information to the public, so that they will be also on board when we are basically implementing these proposals. That's the direction that we are going to go.
Thank you. There were some comments within the panel about revenue targets are very, very ambitious. How confident are you? I mean, because President also said it's time to collect revenue. Everything depends, I mean, it's a domestic arrangement, so how confident and what measures, new measures will you look at?
Yeah, I think this is the key question. I mean, everyone is asking, and this is the key policy measure that we will have to take, and also we have to be very serious on that. Because now, I mean, we should not forget that we are under an IMF program right now. As Dr. Jadri mentioned, there's a contour, right? Within that, we have to prepare our budget. There, we have to have some revenue target. But at the same time, don't forget that we are not only under the IMF program implementing stabilization program, at the same time we are implementing a debt restructuring process as well. So we are asking other countries, other people to basically, give haircut to reduce or whatever their liabilities. And at the same time, they are basically looking at us, what is the contribution you as a country is making to this entire, recovery process. So that is our duty as a country to, put our house in in order. Because we don't forget that we are a country which had about sometimes 28% of revenue to GDP. But in fact, that was mainly due to the taxing of export and all these things. But subsequently, it was reduced. But they at least came to around maybe 16, 17, 18% number, which could basically collect from this system. But due to various reasons in the past, giving concessions and tax, loopholes, compliance issues, you name it, everything was, and also administration issues. This came to around 8% of GDP, which is one of the lowest in the world. Right? Now it is the time, so if you have to basically move forward, you have to reverse it. Somehow you have to reverse it, there's no other chance. Because under the new Central Bank Act, we don't have any money from the Central Bank to finance the budget. And you already know the restrictions or the limitations that we are having until we complete the debt restructuring process, because we are getting money, but at a limited sort of rate, level. So then you can borrow money, but at the same time, there are again limitations. Someone mentioned about this crowding out effect and all these things. But only option that country is having, I want to emphasize it, because if you are not going to get the revenue right, it's very difficult. Country is going to have so many difficulties. But then the next question is, what is your strategy for that? In fact, my understanding is that, already we came up with a relatively strong tax policy. For example, we have at least 4 key taxes: corporate tax, personal income tax, value-added tax, and some few items excise tax. That's the core sort of revenue structure in the country, but there are small taxes. The problem is that how do you basically get the maximum yield out of this policy that is already in place? That's where the tax administration comes into the picture. Because in the past, as I mentioned earlier, there were many attempts to basically digitalize the systems. For example, if you take the Inland Revenue Department, RAMIS was started somewhere in 2013. But still, we have not been able, after 10 years, we have not been able to get in up and running. But now, in fact, very recently also, we had a lot of issues on that. In fact, during the crisis time, we didn't have enough money to pay for the Singapore company. I was telling yesterday also about this. And thanks to the governor, I was able to basically get the required foreign exchange to pay for this company, and they restarted the work starting from this year. I think last month they completed the work. Now I think IRD is in the process of using it, the PACE 2, and basically putting the numbers into the system. Somewhere in 2018 and 19 numbers are now being fed into the system. So gradually they are moving in that direction. That is in terms of digitalization. And not only that, we have to basically complete this system, and we have to have a sort of interlinked system where all the other institutions, banks are also linked to the system. Then only you can have a better sort of information system, because information is very important. And at the same time, there has to be various other mechanisms, for example, audits, and also other mechanisms that we have. If you see the budget proposals that are there in the annexure, the many sort of emphasis has been given to improve the tax administration side, which is lacking in our country due to various reasons. But no point of blaming the history, but at least now we have to go forward and take this as a challenge and implement the reforms. That's the challenge. For that, every employee, every responsible institutions will have to contribute to this, because this is a national task, because the country is in a crisis. I would say it's a deep crisis. I'm the only person who is basically, in addition to the governor, who really understands the deepness of this crisis. Because I almost every day see the numbers. When I'm trying to manage the cash flow, I know what is there and what is not there. And also the demands that are coming from the public, from the private sector, from the parliament, from cabinet, everywhere. So it's a very tough task. But if you are not basically coming up with the revenues, so that's going to be a very difficult task, right? That's the very clear message that I want to give. And then it's very important that we basically, change the mindset of these institutions. Right? Right? But at the same, that's why the president came up with this, revenue authority idea, basically to, guide them and implement the policy, the tax policy, to get the, yield in much more sort of, improved way, so that these revenue agencies will be contributing. Already they are contributing. I'm not saying that they are not doing that. Don't take me wrong, but they are doing a very fantastic job. But what we are saying is that we have to improve it, because the nation asked for that. It's a national responsibility, because given all the other difficulties that we are going through, it's very important that you get the revenue. So you asked many questions about how we get there. We will make sure that whatever the sort of support that the finance ministry and the government should give to this three entities, we will be giving that. Already we have had so many sort of technical assistance programs, thanks to World Bank and also the IMF. We would be coming up, for example, KPIs, quarterly based KPIs, sort of like measures to basically encourage these institutions to basically deliver their whatever the required targets. But of course there are limitations for them as well. For example, internally there could be having some staff issues, for example. I mean, we are in the process of rectifying all these things as well. I mean, we have to be fair with them as well, because there are other issues as well. So we will be basically gradually addressing all these things so that the revenue agencies would be in a better position to basically deliver this, whatever the targets that we are giving, and also we would be basically supporting them to achieve those targets. That's the direction.
Thank you. I like to recognize and also request Governor to come and join the panel, because there are lots of aspects of banking and central bank. Governor, would you like to join? It will be a good opportunity. You took the chance, right? Okay. Sorry. Mr. Sirivardhan, I agree, but can I sort of, because why there is no buying in to some of the government effort is that between the last 4 years of crisis, GDP has shrunk by about $25 to $30 billion. How practical is it to sort of triple the revenue effort in such an environment? The ability to pay, particularly without there is not much growth, the growth would happen if you are lucky next year. That's also not very certain. So given that contraction, and to redouble or such a revenue effort, I'd like to ask from the panelists also as to what can the government really do? Or should we sort of do a freeze on some of the efforts? Maybe response from Secretary and then from the rest of the panelists, also maybe World Bank.
No, I think that's a good question. If you see this year numbers, we heard the sort of same claim, but based on the numbers that we see, we have made around, I don't know, about close to around 800 billion increase this year. So next year it will be around 1.2 trillion change. But here, this year it was a negative growth, and next year it will be turn into a positive growth. So that would provide some stimulus in the tax collection effort. And at the same time, as I mentioned, the policy, these new policies were not there, and some of the policies will be implementing starting from next year. That's number 2. And number 3 is that this particular revenue, 800 or whatever that we got, basically with the existing sort of taxpayers. But the emphasis would be to get many people into the tax net, people who are not paying the taxes. I mean, that is applicable to individuals as well as companies, from small companies to big companies. I'm not saying that big companies are not paying taxes, but we have to improve the system. And at the same time, if you can basically get many people into the system, that's why all this, this 18%, 18 plus people should pay the taxes, and other things are also being, brought in, so that, you have to increase the tax net and basically improve your compliance, and basically make it a habit to pay tax. Should be sort of a habit in the country, but in our country it is different, because it is in the past we had a sort of system where government should provide broadly everything. I mean, I'm not saying everything, but government should provide many things, but you should not charge for that. But you see what happened. We ended up with this sort of a crisis situation. But we can't afford to that any longer. So we have to change. That's why Excellency President was mentioning about the new social contract. Because in that new particular social contract, we should at least understand this new situation. But it is not an excuse for the government not to be responsible. Government has to be very responsible. Whatever the revenues that are being, I think there was a question from the audience as well, whatever the revenues that you are collected should be efficiently, effectively, and transparently spent on that. So that is also, I very support on that, because that's why we have been very tough on that. We have been very tough on that. If you go through the circulars that we issued last year, and it is a difficult task. This system is kind of used to have this sort of situation for last maybe 10, 20, sometimes 30 years. So changing these sort of systems within 1 year is difficult. But at least you have to start. In fact, to me, personally, we have started that journey. It's a journey. You have to basically, go that journey steadily but slowly. Slowly but steadily. But my recollection is that, and my view is that we are in that direction. But at the same time, in order to basically get the maximum out of this expenditure, you have to have legal systems as well. That's why HE was mentioning about it. This public financial management bill will come. We have already drafted that. We got thanks to the World Bank and also ADB and also the IMF. That would provide some sort of a legal framework, and that will be different from the Fiscal Management Responsibility Act that was there since 2003. You know what happened to that. There were some sort of conditions to be achieved, and it was not achieved. But we have to have some sort of binding conditions, but at the same time, they'll be supporting laws as well. But more importantly, what is important is that we should get together everyone, the parliamentarians, the government, the private sector, the media, and also the general public. Basically should push to the government to implement this, whatever the new legal framework that is going to be introduced, to implement this very strongly. That's the only way that we could basically discipline the government. I'm not afraid to say that we should discipline the government, because it is the fiscal indiscipline that this country took into this position. So we have to improve the fiscal discipline. So that's what we are doing, Nisar.
Okay, thank you. Governor, come to you, because there were some questions raised about crowding out private sector with the kind of borrowing, whether there'll be upward pressure on interest rates. Also, under the new act, when will we see the separation of debt of, the actual separation, independence of, in terms of deciding on the debt? Can you respond? Plus also about the strategic sale of public sector, the two state banks.
Thank you. I think, first of all, let me explain why I am determined not to be part of the budget panel is because central bank governor, especially under the new central banking act, should not be commenting, getting involved and intervening in the fiscal policy. Equally, I see under the new central banking act, there's a broader recognition, central bank is independent, monetary policy is independent, and there has to be no conflict between monetary policy and fiscal policy. That's what I think, as long as I appreciate, when you look at the budget debate discussion, Minister's speech, never talk about the central bank interest policy, exchange rate policies, central bank policies, that equally I should respect as a government central bank the independent fiscal policy by the Parliament Public Finance Authority. That's one of the reason this time, the new responsibility, just to make it clear, the understanding of the fiscal and monetary policy. I think that's, I'm happy that even this forum, budget forum, no one asked a question, there are some related questions. Having said that, it's also important to have a proper coordination between fiscal and monetary policy. That's why new institutional structure on the new act, we have the coordination council with SG and myself chairing, and once in quarterly we discuss internally, have a proper coordination. This is most important, the coordination between fiscal and monetary policy, and its impact each other, and while respecting independence of two important macro policy, the authorities. That's one of the reason, even now here, although I have a lot of views on as a personal and professional economist, but I don't want to touch anything on the fiscal policy. I'm sure we have a Secretary of Treasury, is very professional, technically competent. That doesn't mean all the Secretary of Treasuries came from central bank are that competent or professional, that we are seeing historical determination recently. So having said that, obviously budget fiscal policy has an important implication on the monetary policy. That's an important question that was raised. If the government has a lower revenues and maintains same expenditures, then obviously there will be a crowding out. That's an important question Krishant also raised. And so what is the incentive for the fiscal policy to not to do that? If you look at when you have these revenue targets, for them to get revenue realized, and most important part is to get the economy back on the track, not by the government, but by the private sector and others. So for that process, if the government is going to crowding out the resources available for the private sector, then obviously that will have a kind of a vicious cycle of things that we have seen. For example, then obviously there will be no sufficient resources available for the private sector to expand the activities. which means low economic activity, low revenues, and then again, unless adjusted, that it will have a kind of a vicious cycle of things. The virtuous cycle is that if government wouldn't do that, obviously that will be positive in terms of more economic activity, more resources for the private sector. They can collect more revenues out of the revenue yields with more economic activity. I think that is, there's a better understanding of the government role in domestic resource mobilization, how to share that. That's one important point that Krishan also raised. When you look at the usage of domestic resources, the overall contribution of the government and the private sector, if you look at this, in rough estimate, is the government contribution to the overall economic activity, I would say maybe 20%, 80% maybe state-owned enterprise and others. But in terms of share of credit, is completely disproportionate. That's why government has been using a lot of domestic resources for the state-owned enterprises and the public corporations because of the high budget deficits. That has to be addressed. So without addressing that, I don't think, unless we get large foreign exchange inflows, it's difficult to address that part. That is where, going forward, the new policies, cost-reflective pricing mechanism would certainly ensure such a large use of public resources in the banking sector, they would not absorb those resources for their inefficient operation, or at least cost-reflective basis. There will be no expansion of the credit by state enterprises. Secondly, government usage will be limited to the financing the budget, both externally and internally. If we stick to that, obviously there will be a lot more resources through monetary policy operation that will be available for the private sector to operate. That's where the important link between monetary policy and fiscal policy, there's a better understanding now. So having said that, obviously the monetary policy, certainly there's other area, the fiscal dominance in monetary policy and the new act is very clearly addressed. That is where, if you see in the past, there is no comments or even no interventions by the fiscal authorities or even the parliament, you can see sometimes. Exchange rate depreciated in a budget speech. There has been a lot of influencers, Minister of Finance and the authorities in the Minister of Finance asking the central bank to maintain suppress interest rates, maintain exchange rate fixed at certain levels. That is kind of intervention, fiscal dominance and fiscal intervention to the monetary policy during the weak institutional structure. I think I'm happy that going forward, there's a better understanding by the public, there's a broader support from the public, that kind of a demarcation of two responsibilities, and also understanding the implication for each other. On the comment on the public sector, banking sector, obviously one thing, when you look at our key objectives, monetary policy will have to be fully independent, and central bank should be able to determine what the right exchange policy, what right exchange rate to interest rates for the whole country, not only for the government, for the whole country. It's a private sector, SOEs, and the government. Others are a large part. When it comes to final sector stability, obviously there's a shared responsibility. That's why I'm happy that government has recognized that we are a regulator. Central bank is a regulator of the financial institutions, deposit-taking institutions. But when it comes to financing, or when it comes to insolvent financial institution, it is taxpayers' responsibility. If you look at 2008 crisis, global crisis, where the governments intervened and helped through taxpayers' money to bail out the banks, those are falling. I don't see, that's why this preparation and government recognition, they have a responsibility. That's why it's important. Government, with the responsibility, allocated sufficient funds in case if that is needed to recapitalize banking sector through taxpayers' money. That recognition is there. That's their role clearly identified in the budget. But we as a regulator, I don't think, again, the decision of the government and the parliament, how state ownership of the banks would be divested, how those governance should be improved. And there's a collective and shared responsibility, both through amendment to the Banking Act and improve the governance of these state-owned banks, and also diversify all the decision by the fiscal authority, but we certainly will coordinate and support. But our interest is to maintain a stable finance system, irrespective of state owned or the private owned. That's where I think our role. I'm happy to see that proper coordination and better understanding of each other's roles and taking responsibilities of their roles going forward. And that's the only comment I would like to share here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open up any questions to, yes.
Thank you. Nisa, I have 3 questions probably ST can answer. The first one is, I think probably it may be a stupid question, but pardon my stupidity. President Wickremesinghe expressed about there is no free meal and reiterating the point that Dr. Vijayawardena made about fiscal discipline. And but when we talk about numbers on this budget, the budget is totally about increasing the tax revenue. And the tax revenue from the interim budget this year has been increased from 2.5 trillion to 3.8 trillion. And whereas fiscal discipline, whereas the budget deficit is proposed to be increased from 2.4 trillion to 2.8 trillion. Now, where does this statement of President reflects on the numbers? Where is the fiscal discipline with regard to the government expenditure, talking about the government revenue? And then the second question is about the SMEs. As you know, I'm specifically talking about SMEs of manufacturing industrial exports, as the census and statistics also declares that about half of the SMEs are already wiped out. And about 500,000 employees of the SME sector plus the manufacturing sector also are out of jobs. While the government is proposing 10,000 rupees increment in the cost of living allowance for the state sector, the private sector is reeling, especially the export manufacturing, by not having the capability of increasing the salaries of the employees for next year and even providing bonuses. So the SMEs on the budget, other than proposing a 250 billion rupee loan scheme, while the SMEs are already suffering with these debt moratoriums and all this, how come this proposed 250 billion help the SMEs to spring back or begin?
Okay.
And the third question, I have one more, right? The third question is about the export manufacturing and FDIs, where the country is having a perpetual problem of trade balance, which stems the current account balance of payment issues. What the government has taken the measures other than proposing about single window investment facilitation, plus talking about the bilateral trade agreements, which we've been talking about for very long. Whereas, for example, with the bilateral trade agreement with India, haven't paid any dividends to our country. What are the measures that the government has taken in improving influx of FDIs and facilitating export manufacturing in this country, other than this in this budget proposals?
Thank you. Mr. Sirivadana, shall we take more questions, or you'd like to respond? I think you can respond to the first two. The third one, we can skip it.
No, I see your point. I think single window is something that has been discussing for many years, and there were attempts as well, but at least now we have taken a sort of fresh look at it, and we are going to be committed on that. because we know the importance of, introducing this and getting it up and running. So we have had several rounds of discussions as well. At this particular moment, what I can mention is that, we are committed to implement that, and work is progressing. What other things that have been done, just to, cite one example, I think it was discussed in the budget as well, and there was a previous budget, there was a reference to, coming with this is National Economic Commission. In fact, after many sort of deliberations, in fact, mainly led by the private sector, a new act has been drafted, and there will be institutional changes. There will be new international trade office. There will be new institution. In fact, I don't know whether you remember, there was a proposal to basically combine some of the institutions, for example, BOI, part of the BOI and the EDB and sort of other institutions. That has also already been, sort of drafted, and that will come. And that would provide, I take your point. I mean, immediately you could see that there's no mentioning about this sort of thing in the budget, but as Excellent President mentioned, that this is a journey. Because last year we came up with a lot of proposals, especially legal and other changes. I don't know whether many of you are aware of it, but there's several number of teams that are working on these legislations. For example, I mentioned about few things. For example, this Public Financial Management Bill, Aid Management Bill, PPP Bill, all have been, drafted. So this sort of, action is being taken, although we have not, announced into the public. But I take your point, because it is important that we, come up with these sort of policies and expedite it. And that's the sort of commitment that has been given, particularly not only this India thing, but also the other FTAs, to basically complete those things as early as possible, and also to, improve the investment environment in this country. We have been discussing this for last many decades, and now, at least with this new institutional arrangement, we are very hopeful that this will change going forward.
Thank you again for the opportunity. And I have a very pertinent question from Mr. Sirivardhan, because you emphasize strongly that collection of taxes from each and everyone is a must, and we agree that. But only thing is that taxpayers' point of view, I have a few unclear areas, because you know that in government sector, there is no proper PMS system or KPIs to evaluate their performances. But for the taxpayers, we have to pay taxes on to promote inefficiencies in the country. And also the corruption is not stopped. It is going as same. So then there is no benefit to the taxpayers also, additional benefit. So I know that in other countries like Australia, Canada, there are systems where the taxpayers are benefiting and they are happy to pay that tax voluntarily. But here there is no such system to control all these things, but taxpayers are squeezed to pay all the taxes. So my question is, it is unfair, and country will not develop because there is no such system to see. So then I need a very clear answer for that.
Yeah, we'll take another question. Yes.
Actually, my question is, last year budget also in a different from I raised this question. We all know due to this last April, due to this bankruptcy situation, government declared like all the loans, like if we consider different government entities, they are doing various projects based on loan. For example, say Airport and Aviation doing a second terminal projects, which is 110 billion projects based on JICA loan. Suddenly, due to this government particular circular issued on April 12th, 2022, these all donor countries stopped. Therefore, all these contractors stopped their halfway done work. Actually, now, in my point of view, it's a big loss for as a country, because as per these contractual conditions, even though since this termination comes from the Sri Lankan government, we have to pay billions of compensations, claims. So my question is, I think no one studied this macro level. If Treasury has done a big study on this, it will be, I think, more than 100 billions we have to pay as claims without doing anything. So my question is, what type of things, what type of concessionaries, what type of actions have been taken out of this budget to address this type of concerns? Because ultimately these, everything will be borne by the Sri Lanka. Maybe, for example, airport and aviation side, Treasury will say, okay, you have money, you pay these claims. But ultimately, as a country, we are paying yens or dollars or whatever foreign currency in the outside world. What type of actions you have taken, Treasury point of view, to address this type of issues? These are hidden issues, but will have a big impact to the economy.
Thank you. One more question before I ask Secretary to respond. Any related issues? I have a question. Actually, there was someone did ask about using POS terminals to pay VAT. Mrs. Sirivardhana, as a collection point, was referred to in the budget speech as well.
Mr. Sirivardhana, last budget it was mentioned that this PAL and cess will be phased out within 3 to 5 years' time. After 1 year, the same thing is mentioned in the budget this time also, it will be phased out. So when we are going to do that? Because this cess is largely misused by some of the local industries, especially if I take the construction material sector. Some of the companies have been given the privilege of using this cess to discourage the imports and just sell their product at a higher price. People are paying to protect government entities plus some of the private investments. In the name of investment, still some of the companies are managed to mislead authorities to just change the tax policies of this country. How you are going to eliminate this?
Thank you. Mrs. Sirivardhana.
So many questions. No, I think your question and concerns are all valid. In fact, Cho is with us. We have already, taken action to pace out this. In fact, as the first phase, we have already done. I don't remember the number of, HS codes that we've removed that, but it's a condition. I think Cho would vouch on that. We have already done that. We have basically adhered to that commitment. And this year we said that to show our commitment to pace it out. And I fully agree with you. Pacing out of the cess and the PAL is a commitment of the government, and it is a commitment of under the IMF, the ADB, the World Bank program as well. And so you can explain on that. And on the use of POS terminal to pay the taxes, in fact, we had we got a lot of proposals, and on that basis, in fact, we had a discussion as well internally and with also experts as well. And then the recommendation was that basically not to go straight away for that, but at least to mention in the budget saying that we encourage the using of POS machines, so that there will be a sort of a message that they will have to get ready at some point of time going forward. That's the basic thinking behind that. And also your question on the this announcement of the debt standstill. I think we have to take words very clear. We have not announced bankruptcy. We have announced a temporary suspension of selected government external debt, mainly ISBs and bilateral loans. Multilateral loans, we did not stop. We continue to pay. I think Governor can confirm that. Close to 1 billion, even with this debt standstill, we continue to pay, and we are still continuing to pay to the multilateral loans. So that's the clear position on that. And you are very right, because as a result of this announcement, there were sort of, this termination, or rather temporary suspension of these projects, because if you take the Japan experience, because it is, I think, if there are Japanese, they can basically confirm on that. It is their law that they can't lend to a country which has announced this sort of debt standstill. It's a technical internal thing in the donor countries. But what is important for us is to how you manage this situation internally. I take your point. There could be cost escalations. Already we have seen that, and in fact, every week we see that at the cabinet expenditure subcommittee. But at the same time, this has been discussed at these sort of meetings, and we have, according to my understanding, sort of informed the respective parties to be very mindful about this, and also, if possible, start negotiations on that, so get the maximum amount, best position to Sri Lanka, because this is something that is very important, and we have, especially external resources department of the Treasury is working on that, and they are very well aware of it. Unfortunately, I don't have the numbers, but they are working on this. And the last question about the payment of taxes, and also the utilization of these taxes, and how you basically ensure that these are being used for the better purposes. And also you mentioned about corruption, bribery, and all sort of things. In fact, first one I want to respond is that if you see the structure of the government cash flow, about 95 billion goes to the payment of salaries. About maybe 30 billion goes to the payment of pensions. Another maybe 25, 28, say 30 billion goes to the payment of welfare payments. And the balance to the interest payments. But we have given the highest priority on the expenditure on the health sector, because health sector is very important. We have ensured that whatever the requested money is given out of the cash flow to ensure a better health service. From the financing side, you can talk about other things, but I'm talking about from the Ministry of Finance side, we have given the support to the maximum possible extent. So whatever the revenues that we are getting, for example, we are getting on monthly basis around 215 billion. So you can imagine your revenues are being better used to pay these salaries and all these things. But the issue is that whether there is any possibility of leaking money through the other sources, for example, procurement or whatever, say the capital expenditures or projects, that's the area that you have to address. And many sort of comments that we are hearing and we are seeing in the media is due to the implementation of the projects, and also the potential or the perceived sort of corruption in the past, and also the possibility of having that in the future as well. So that's where the issue is. So that's what I fully agree with you, because we have to stop these things, but elimination, I don't think that is a possibility, but at least we have to minimize it. So minimizing the corruption and the other issues is the requirement, and is in fact by bringing up this this Anti-Corruption Act, and also the new mechanism, it is also under the IMF's governance structure as well, basically to have a better and active setup in the country, so that you adhere to whatever the required actions under that, and implement that, so that these sort of issues would be addressed in the future, and we would be able to prevent happening these sort of things going forward. But in general, I don't know how to respond to your the question, because money is fungible. Once it is received to the Treasury, we are using to these sort of priority areas. So that's the sort of broad answer that I can give to you.
Governor, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, one small comment that I want to make on the, because there's a statement made about the debt suspension 12th April. I think the comment, I don't know about specific projects, I think STIC and airport project or somewhere. I think the point I want to make is that if there also no announcement of debt suspension, after a week we could have gone through a hard default. Would be a worst crisis that any country would have happened, would have encountered. If that happens, not only, I mean, right now, because of the announced debt suspension with an intention to restructure, renegotiate the debt obligations, that is where we have come so far, and that is why other bilateral partners who are basically suspended as a result of that, now waiting to come back and recommence those projects. The alternative, as he suggested, if that's the worst thing, if we allow the government to default without any announcement, even this bilateral partner would never come back for several years to recommence their projects. That's a good point that someone should do an analysis and see the cost and benefit of announced debt suspension versus the hard default. So alternative would have been, that's why people wouldn't understand. I'm sure the recent judgment has clearly understood that and determined the causes. And this is where I think I would encourage Minister of Finance to conduct a study as he proposed. What would be the alternative if that was not done? What would have been the cost to the country, cost to the economy? How many partners would come back if we went through that route, as I think indicated by someone here? So I will make that statement. Thank you.
Thanks. And if there are any more questions for the panel?
Question for Bingumal. I think now looks like the country appears to have come out of part of the woods, as it were. Is there sufficient confidence in the foreign investors, from the foreign investor side of point of view, to invest in the country, in our stock markets? I think now Adani Group has invested, is going to invest in the port and so on. So can we see a lot of foreign interest back in the country soon?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. We are not out of the woods, said you said. Partially we are out, I agree. Somewhat we made some progress. We still have the debt suspension and the default rating. But with all of that, there is interest in Sri Lanka on specific sectors. Like one big sector is renewable energy, solely because of the northern Mana, that basin. I think there are a lot of World Bank studies on this one. They are of the view that there are about 40 gigawatts opportunity, wind power opportunity in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is actually in the top 3 in the world for wind power in terms of concentration. So these are multi-billion-dollar FDI opportunities that can go into market. They are like market expanding FDIs. You have to re-export because our requirement is only maybe 7-8 gigawatts in total. So those corporates are lining up very clearly. They have met the BOI, they met the government, but the policy framework is still not ready for that kind of large investor. We are not ready at all, in my view, to bring a large investor like that. Of course, there are conversations on tourism. There's a BOI pipeline of over $1 billion. So I think everybody is doing their feasibility studies. Of course, the SOE reforms. I think on some of the SOEs on sale, I think there are investors for those as well. I think everybody is waiting for a rating upgrade. So crossing debt restructuring would be critical. But the conversations are happening. Those investors are visiting Sri Lanka as well. We can't expect a typical OECD investor coming to Sri Lanka and setting up a factory. We are naive to think like that. If we have a treaty with India to re-export, that's an opportunity. But at this point, we don't see those large manufacturers coming here because the market size is also very small. But Sri Lanka has a niche on many areas. I think we have to play to our strengths.
Bingu, since you have the mic, there was a sort of suggestion to increase the withholding tax as a fairly efficient tax, and it was sort of collections have been very good. You did say that it can be used, banks can be used effectively as well. Government didn't go for an increase. What you think they could have looked at it as a efficient revenue measure?
We were expecting that because withholding tax is an easy way of, I can't recall the numbers, maybe 40-50 billion rupees minimum. Would have been an option, but this was a discussion in one of the other panels where I participated. The response was like the impact to the senior citizens, there's no claiming process, etc. So we can't again go back and say senior citizens will get 1% more, very difficult for central bank to administrate these things and refund the banks. So because that whole thing, I think government decided to stay away from things like withholding tax, but withholding tax would have been a low-hanging fruit until we broaden, because until we broaden, we see a serious problem in the revenue collection.
I'd like to wrap it up. If there are, okay.
My concern is about there's a 20% of shares going to be transferred to investors, strategic investment or public. It means our customer base is the main important thing in the banks. It may be badly affect to our customer base. Another thing is anybody who don't have TIN number can't open the deposit account in future. It means how you answer for these questions.
Yeah, maybe I'll add to that question, Mrs. Srivardhana. I mean, there were some issues with Ramesh. You couldn't manage the increased workload when you basically, how ready are you? I mean, President did ask, is the private sector ready? But is the Indian revenue ready for this revenue, massive revenue effort? If not, what is being done?
No, I think it's a very valid question. That's why they are also making every effort to get the system in place. But I see your point, because last year also we had some, some issues in the system. It's come to the last day of the, submitting the this tax related documents. But we have discussed about it. But right now I don't have any clear answer for that. But we have identified it. We have identified it's an issue. So that will be gradually addressed when we move forward.
I'll allow the panelists to sort of make their final comments. If possible, if you, given the discussions we have had, rich discussion, ideal expectations that you would hope. Now the budget is over, but
may I ask one last question?
I have two last questions. Yeah, you can ask. Okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about wealth tax coming and super gain tax to come, but nothing came on the budget. Any signs of that happening? Thank you.
So you can see that there was no super gain tax in the budget. So the response is that. But then the other question is very important, wealth tax or whatever. In fact, this was proposed last year. In fact, the idea is to basically, introduce it starting from 2025 January. But we have understood that, it's not an easy task, because it involves a lot of work. In fact, we already had, some technical assistance missions, and basically to, see the other country experiences, and also to, identify the legal framework, and also, this involves many things, right? And then, sort of, capacity building, and also, have the physical infrastructure required for this. So it's a sort of, relatively a big task. So we have, a very good cooperation and coordination with the IMF and the relevant, experts on this. And basically, we want to introduce it in a much more effective, and basically based on the other country experiences as well. So there's no rush, because we have whole 1 year, in fact 14 months to get prepared for that. So we are in that direction. So it's very premature to make any comment on that. But idea is to basically come up with that. The modalities, the ways will have to be decided once we complete all these, other prerequisites.
One last question, because we touched the renewable energy sector. I'm in the renewable energy space, and now the CEB's perspective is fixed tariff for 20 years on all the tenders, where the market dynamic is such that even if I ask the governor, you can't tell me for the next 10 years my loan interest rates, what to predict. I don't think anyone can predict. And why there's a huge disconnect between the market fundamentals on the ground and the policy. And we as a local company are very happy to invest. Why is Adani and other foreign investors given dollar tariff options, where local companies who have the capability and the resources to invest are not being given a dollar tariff? And if there's a dollar tariff, we can generate, and we can give a competitive rate also, because present tariff solar power going at 8 US cents, which is competitive in the Asian context. Now, even at one energy ministry forum, I said, no, if you're not willing to be flexible to give a fair tariff in the long run? How are we to retain people, and how are the local energy companies supposed to survive? I can go abroad and make money in dollars, and that's not a problem. I want to be here. But if you all are not willing to be fair by the local people, local investors, how is the sustainability going to happen? Thank you.
Mr. Siriwardana, maybe respond, and Chio would like to.
Unfortunately, I am not an expert on that direction because that subject. But certainly, I will convey your concerns to the Power Ministry, so that we can have a separate discussion on that.
Yes, a couple of things. So the power framework, the entire policy is changing as we speak. I'm unable to comment on the long-term tariff, but power wheeling to liberalizing power is in the cards for sure. It has to happen. In terms of local, foreign, I think we have to treat everybody equally and definitely support the local investors, no doubt about it. Also, we have to be open-minded to partner with the global investors because these are large investments. I don't think any local company can invest $5 to $10 billion in the power opportunity we have. This is huge. Forget 5-10, can we invest $500 million at this point? We can't. Not a single bank in Sri Lanka can support $1 billion on its own. So we have to be very careful and open-minded. I think we should go for partnership. JK Chadan is a good partnership in my view. We have to look at partnering with some of these global giants and get the benefit for the country.
Thank you. Chan, you had a question, right? Sorry, I forgot that.
Yeah, no, in terms of prioritizing the resources, for us to have a knowledge economy, we need to have graduate output coming in, coming out of the universities. But at the moment, I did ask this question in private, but I think it's important that we kind of get a commitment to prioritize the resources of the government to where it matters and where it aligns to the policy. So one question I had was, there is a freeze on academic recruitment in universities. And we have lost a fair number of our academics who have gone overseas. So we can't produce knowledge workers without academics being recruited into university. And is there opportunity for the Treasury to reprioritize some of the expenses and to allow recruitment into the university cadre is one of the questions I had for Mr. Siriwardana. Yeah.
No, in fact, if you see the way we operated, though we issued that circular, I think I remember in 2022, April 26th, we basically asked institutions to basically freeze the recruitment. But that not necessarily say that if there's any justifiable area and need is there, and there was a mechanism to basically get the relevant approval and basically go ahead with that. So we will see whether this is also a possible area, so that if there's a real need, I think we will be looking at it. Yeah.
Thank you. Time to wrap up. I know, thank you very much. You have been a great audience, but I think given the tight schedules of the panelists, so I'll just invite the panelists to sort of, if they have last remark, Krishan maybe.
Just quickly on tourism, President mentioned it in his speech, and in the budget also it got a special mention, and I think at various forums, President refers to it as the low-hanging fruit for the country. It is clearly the low-hanging fruit. Our peak arrivals were in 2018. That was 2.3 million tourists. Our target is 5 million, but I think we can do much more very quickly. Bali in 2019, before COVID, had 7 million or more tourist arrivals. Couple of priority areas is the airport, new airport terminal. It may be an interim terminal if it can be built very quickly. There has been talk about that. And then in the budget, there was a mention of a promotion campaign. Important to get that going, and I think what was allocated is possibly not enough. It's about ₹1 billion, which is $3 million, but it's a good start. So very quickly, I think we had $4 billion of tourism revenue in 2018. We could go to $5, $6, $7 billion very quickly. It's really a low-hanging fruit and should be a focus area.
Minister, very quickly, first thing first, I think we should all put our efforts around it, restructuring. Getting out of debt suspension or the default status that we are in would be critical for country to move forward. So we can't go beyond March 31st on this one. We have to get it done. Second thing is broadening. I think you have to start it now or maybe yesterday. and make sure every step that we move towards, taking the interest to, the revenue to something like a 20% in the medium term. Of course, this year can be a challenging one, but we have to make sure we broaden. How do we add the number of tax files? How do you make sure the citizens are responsible to pay taxes? Not the government is responsible to collect taxes. In a lot of the countries, the citizen or the corporate is responsible. The promoters are responsible. You can put people behind bars. So activating the whole legal system would be critical. Moment you get to a certain level, I think renegotiating with IMF would be critical for us. We can't go with this universal tax of 30% and 36%. We are one of the highest in Asia at this point. Asia's average corporate tax is 19 point, less than 20%, right? We are 30%. We are close to India and Australia, so we can't really compete or compare ourselves with India or Australia. We have to be competitive in terms of bringing corporates into the country, as well as for the local corporates to reinvest back into their businesses. And for the younger generation, I think we have to make sure the young executives are protected during this time. So renegotiation with IMF at some point would be critical for Sri Lanka.
Thank you. It's obvious that stabilization and the rebuilding the fiscal space debt structure needs to be done. At the same time, it's going to be too painful, and maybe it's not a good idea. Sri Lanka cannot afford waiting for all the stabilization to happen before start investing and then encouraging the growth. So the challenge the country has is basically rebuilding the whole ship, overhauling it while sailing it, right? So in that sense, the government is trying to do the really stabilization, but trying to also start engine and then start sailing, moving forward. So as a World Bank and together with other development partners, we've been trying to support that very challenging, difficult process in a narrow path. And then there are some ways and instruments to de-risk some of the investments, like providing leveraging from using the World Bank or the other MDB financing, or the providing guarantees, and so that give a bit more comfort and for the private sector to start investing. So we'll stand ready to help whatever we can do, and then so that we can build as we sail. So thank you very much.
I think the success of the budget will depend on its implementation and not on the speech delivered by the President in Parliament or the debate that is taking place within Parliament now. So Mr. Sirivardhana very correctly said that the revenue target should be realized. I also agree with him. One advantage he has is that in modern days, the taxes are paid not on the real income, but on the nominal income. In ancient times, when we had Sri Lanka kings, taxes are paid in kind, so it was a real tax. So the real income is falling, but the nominal income is rising. For example, the nominal GDP in 2023 was 30 trillion, and 2024 we expect it to rise to about 33 trillion. So as a result, Mr. Sirivardhana will be able to generate his tax revenue, but at the same time I have to warn him that there can be a spillover effect on the expenditure, which he has to control very strictly. If it happens, all the budget numbers would go haywire, and so the expenditure has to be controlled, and no more supplementary estimates, and all the spending agencies should be instructed not to come up with new supplementary estimates. By disciplining both the expenditure side and also generating the revenue, I think Mr. Sirivardhana will be able to achieve a success in his second budget, I think. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think for me, the prioritization of the initiatives, I think wonderful initiatives in the budget, policy intent is very clear. But I think to pick a few that we really want to make an impact with and executing that well. The President invited the private sector to come and step in where the public sector is unable to execute, but we know the limitations within the government regulations as to how much the private sector can get involved. I think the bilateral agencies have a big role to play in funding the expertise and the capacity that's required in the government to execute some of the key initiatives. And that, if we get that right and prioritize some of the key ones, I think then the rest will fall into place.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the panelists as well as on behalf of the two organizers and the participants for making it very interactive. Lots of new knowledge, I'm sure, and a lot of new learning. And thank you very much, and over to Shan.
Can we put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for our moderator and our panelists? We'd like to invite Mr. Suraj Radhampala, the Deputy President of the MBA Alumni Association and Project Chairman. Could you please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, to Mr. Radhampala.
Leaders of the business community, on behalf of the MBA Alumni Association, it's my privilege as the chairman of the organizing committee to thank you for taking time off from your official duties to attend our post-budget forum. Our primary objective for this forum was to build a constructive and inclusive discussion about the government's annual budget. I believe that we reached our goals beyond the expectations. I extended my sincere appreciation to our keynote speaker, Excellency, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, for his enlightening address that set the tone for the discussion today. I would also like to acknowledge our distinguished panelist, Mr. Mahinda Sriwadana, Secretary to Treasury, Ministry of Finance, Ms. Chiokanda, World Bank's Country Manager for Sri Lanka and Maldives, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor, Central Bank, Mr. Bingumal Tevaratantri, CEO of Standard Chartered Bank, Mr. Krishan Balendra, Chairman of John Keys Holdings, Mr. Channa Manoharan, Managing Partner, CEO, Deloitte Partners, and our moderator, Mr. Nista Qasim, Chief Editor, CEO of Daily FT. Your generous sharing of expertise and perspectives on the budget has been invaluable in shedding lights on complexities and potential solutions in our economic landscape. I would like to express my gratitude to our esteemed patron, Senior Professor H.D. Karunaratne, the MBA Alumni Coordinator, Professor B. Nishantha, and all the distinguished invitees and invitees for participating in this session. I would like to express my gratitude to our sponsors, especially our strategic partner, Standard Chartered Bank, our knowledge partner, Deloitte Partners, and our creative partner, Geometry, for their generous support. Further, I would like to thank the Shangri-La team for providing their services and Job Enrich Private Limited for their audio-visual support. Also, thank you, Compere Sharon Mascarenhas and Errol Johnson for the photography. I extended my sincere gratitude to all attendees for your active participation, thoughtful questions, and constructive feedback. Your engagement has greatly enriched the discussion and contributed to the success of the event. I must also extend my acknowledgement to the hard-working and dedicated members of our organizing committee who consistently delivered their best efforts. The countless hours investing, planning, coordinating, and execution have undoubtedly contributed to the resounding success of this forum. Additionally, special mention should be made of the Daily FT team for their invaluable support, which greatly contributed to the success of the event. Thank you. Have a great day ahead.
For more latest news, subscribe to FTTV.